Well, that single sentence is 100 years' work. Actually, you've got to.
Do we actually understand why we age? Do you think there's a risk of people moralizing Ozempic?
We humans are shocking as a species. Now, you can't beat a bit of shaming, can you?
We usually underestimate the role of genetics on obesity. Could you use an mRNA vaccine to vaccinate against certain chronic diseases, possibly cancers? Do you think it's possible?
Absolutely. There's a bit of a nightmare at the moment in America where they hate RNA.
You're obviously very impressed by CRISPR technology.
Yeah. No, you have to be impressed by that. That's like a microscope.
In the next 50 years, what's a potential societal threat or civilization threat that could maybe tip us into chaos? Is it too simplistic to say that inflammation kind of acutely, if you have a cut or an infection, is good, and maybe chronic low-grade inflammation systemically is bad? Or is that...
You've got it. That's solo. That single sentence is 100 years' work. Actually, you've got it exactly. So we've known for a long time, we go back hundreds of years, inflammation is good for you. And it evolved actually to fix a wound or to fight an infection and repair our tissues. And that's the way it is. It's a really important process. But then the mystery is, when does that system become disease causing? And it becomes chronic, as you say. That's one thing that happens for definite. Some of these pathways are dysregulated. And the problem is we don't know, because you're using your own inflammatory process, which is there to help you to do damage. And that's one of the big questions we have, is what's happening in that transition from a normal homeostatic function, as we call it, into this more pathologic state. And we're trying to figure that out.
When did people start talking about chronic disease or maybe like long-term illness? Was it because of increased maybe urban density or life expectancy and things like that? Like when?
Well, life expectancy was a big one because people are living longer, and they noticed this to be maybe 100 years ago or more, I would think. Like arthritis was a big one I worked on for years. And rheumatoid arthritis and osteoarthritis, those types of joint diseases, they get worse as you age. Your joints begin to creak, and then don't work as well. And you get these awful sort of painful illnesses to do with joints. And that was sort of observed very early on, I think. But of course, as we've all got to the stage of living older, all of these inflammatory conditions are going up, simply to do with age. And that's a big question. Why does aging promote these diseases? What's changing in the immune system as we get older to pivot it into this more disease-driven state, I guess, is one question. There's no doubt modern living is rubbish, is a phrase we use, right? So in other words, things like the environment, it could be obesity, it could be microplastics, who knows? These things seem to provoke all this. And they're building up as we in us as we age as well. So there's various ideas. And then we have this term inflammaging, of course, which some people think the aging process itself is partly driven by inflammation, getting worse as we get older, and then the aging process kicks in. So that's an interesting area as well. And it's no coincidence all these diseases go up then, because simply living means our bodies get more and more damaged as we age. And that could be metabolic partly because, we're generating byproducts of food that build up on our tissues, because our tissues get less able to handle it. And that there's a sort of a vicious circle then developing, we think, partly.
Do we actually understand why we age, like at a really basic level? Like, is it, like you said, is it that the cells get worn out metabolically? Is it just general wear and tear? Like, why do we age? I've actually never heard a proper explanation for that.
That's a fantastic question that we don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's a very strange thing, Huge area of research. I know lots of people. We don't work on that specifically. I know lots of labs who do. Like, why would a mouse live 3 years and a human 80 years? That's a mystery, Why do certain trees live to be 1,000? These are the questions that people have puzzled over for decades, really. I mean, is body mass, the size of the animal is one factor, the lifestyle is a factor as well. For some reason, we can't become immortal, as we age, and our cells have a finite number of divisions built into them. And it probably is something to do with oxygen or something like that. In other words, we're always breathing in oxygen. Over time, that just begins to become more difficult to handle for some reason in tissues. But there's sort of various theories as to why this is. We love, for example, animals that live to a long age, like bats, for example. So a bat would be the same size as a mouse in its body size, right? But it lives to be 30 or 40 years of age. Why is that? Is it because it's very metabolically demanding animal, because it flies everywhere and maybe contains some of the damage more effectively? So there's all these questions around these, what I call model organisms, to try and help answer. But it is the unrelenting mystery that you've asked there. Why do we age? It's still not known.
And yeah, it probably is true that maybe smaller females tend to live longer. Is that correct? Like in general?
There's some evidence size is tied into it somehow, but it's not as simple as that either, I don't think. That's one idea that's been been kicked around. And as you may know, every time a cell divides, the chromosomes get shorter, these telomeres shorten. Now, why is that? That seems unusual. And then they get so short, the cell dies. Over time, that must connect into the aging process as well, because you can't renew. Stem cells begin to die off more because they've only got a finite number. As soon as the egg is fertilized, the clock is ticking at 6. Okay. And every time a cell divides, it's getting slightly older, so it's a strange one.
A lot of the studies and research that have went into dementia, and particularly Alzheimer's, is focused on the amyloid cascade hypothesis.
Yep.
So some people would say maybe that inflammation has been underrated or under-researched or possibly underfunded there. Would you agree that inflammation might play a bigger role in Alzheimer's and maybe other dementias?
Yeah, I think it was neglected a bit. That's true. People thought Alzheimer's wasn't to do with that, really. They thought it was some neurological problem, And then once beta amyloid was discovered, and that was maybe 50 years ago or something like that, people, well, what is that? Is that a consequence of the disease, which it could be still, actually? Or is it causing the disease, the build-up of this beta amyloid stuff? And then the interest began to grow around that. And then the next part of the story was we realized, not my lab, obviously, this is about 30, 40 years ago, the immune system tries to clear that stuff. Because one of the immune system jobs is to clear stuff that builds up in tissues. That's a bit harmful, And then we began to realize the cell types involved there get overactive. And they drive too much inflammation now, because it's like a good analogy we use is like a vacuum cleaner trying to hoover this stuff up, It starts to overheat, and that begins to damage that part of the brain. And all the evidence began to grow to support that. The beta amyloid hypothesis was a bit controversial. The big question is it a cause or a consequence? But now we have an antibody, as you probably know, there's 2 antibodies proved that clear the amyloid plaque. They target that beta amyloid, and they seem to be bringing benefits. So that would further confirm the hypothesis, if you know what I mean. But you're right, though. Initially, the neuroscientists wouldn't have been interested in inflammation. They wouldn't have thought that was a key thing. And the data began to build up. And like all good scientists, they respond to data as it emerges, and the data becomes more and more compelling,
Yeah, interesting. So the new treatments, they definitely work to an extent, but it might only be 6 months of extra normal living. It's not... They're not obviously great cures. So
they're not great, but they are good, and they're the first drugs to slow the disease a bit, and that's how advanced. Nothing has ever achieved that before. But you're quite right, though. I mean, and not all patients respond. There's a side effect. You get these brain bleeds in some people because you're triggering an immune. You're actually triggering the immune system to clear the plaque in a more effective way, and that can have a consequence, I guess. But there are responders. I'm hearing some people respond more than others. Huge effort now going into this, of course. I always think, Donald, it's like your fingertips on a cliff face type thing, So at last we're hanging up. Now can we climb up the cliff? And lots of people are working on those therapeutics now. And patients are on them, and you can study those patients in various ways. So we see it as a step in the right direction, but it's a baby step. That's what I'd call it.
Okay. Yeah, because you hear people talking about something called cognitive reserve, which obviously might be whatever cognitive activities you do during your life that give you a certain amount of resilience against cognitive decline. So do you think there's things potentially that we could do earlier in life that can prevent dementia and Alzheimer's?
There's a great thing in the Lancet yesterday. This has come out a few months ago, but there's a really good review of it. There's something like 14 modifiable things you can do to ward off the development of dementia and Alzheimer's. And it's the usual things: exercise, diet, not too much alcohol, these sorts of things. Social activity seems to be important. Deafness turns out to be a huge risk factor, hearing loss.
Yeah, I actually came across that before. Yeah,
that's more and more evidence for that now. Now, what's going on there, we think, is if you go slightly deaf, you're not quite as engaged with the world, and your brain begins to get less active, perhaps. And, that kind of the cognitive reserve knowledge, it's like a muscle. Obviously, the more you use your brain, maybe you'll ward off ill effects, just like you would if you take exercise to help your muscles to be effective. And all the evidence would support that. And I think there are modifiable things we can do that really seem to work, The problem we have is it's a very heterogeneous disease. So even though you have 100 people presenting with it, they could be all slightly different. There could be different reasons in some of them to others, even though the endpoint is shared. The path to that endpoint might differ. That makes it very difficult to study then experimentally, because it's such different. You might study something and it'll be statistically insignificant because half the people aren't like that, and then you're kind of stuck,
Yeah, because obviously
some notion of a reserve is really good. A good idea there, and again, things like keeping your brain active, the usual things that we talk about, that seems to be beneficial as well to build up that reserve.
Because obviously some people do seem to have this buildup of amyloid plaques in the brain, but they don't actually get cognitive decline, which is strange.
You should be in my lab helping us. It's a strange thing because that means it can't be causative in those people. You know?
Yeah.
There's people walking around with as much plaque as someone who has Alzheimer's and they've no disease. Now, why is that? You know, that's a real mystery. So again, that'd be evidence against the amyloid hypothesis, of course. You know?
Yeah. And what about tau proteins? Do they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was the next thing. As you know, there wasn't just being amyloid. There's a number of proteins built up, and tau is a key one as well. Now, what's interesting there is, from my research and what we work on, I think, on NLRP3. I don't know if you've come across this stuff in our lab. So NLRP3 is the key sensor inside microglial cells and macrophages that gets activated by beta amyloid. So when a macrophage phagocytoses something, this NLRP3 system is turned on. It drives IL-1, IL-18, two key cytokines, and a type of cell death of pyroptosis. This has been worked out for the past 15 years or so. And of course, that would be agnostic to the stimulus, if you know what I mean. So if there was tau in some people, that would go through NLRP3, so would beta amyloid. So we think NLRP3 is a great target because it can ignore the provoker. And maybe in some people there's more tau than someone else, and someone else is more beta amyloid. The antibody will only work in the beta amyloid people, not the tau people, and vice versa. Whereas this approach could be more general for blocking stuff that's phagocytosed, basically.
Is there some evidence emerging now that GLP-1 agonists, so semaglutide, Ozempic, might lower inflammation and maybe prevent or lessen dementia and Alzheimer's?
I think in my view, there's evidence for that. The jury's still out, though, I'd say, first of all, but there is evidence. Now, what's happened there was scientists noticed people on those drugs had at lower risk of these things. They saw there was a decreased incidence of Parkinson's as well, and Alzheimer's in people on them, and other inflammatory conditions as well. And then there's also a bit of biology here. We know GLP-1 can be anti-inflammatory in certain contexts. It can turn off macrophages. The trouble with that is it's kind of a lab-based thing, and but there is evidence for that as well. So when you combine those two things, observational stuff and some mechanistic evidence, you begin to wonder. And what's happening now, of course, is trials are running specifically with the likes of Ozempic and Wegovy and so on, the semaglutide-based therapeutics, to do it a double-blind placebo. The trouble with the observational stuff is that's retrospective.
Yeah.
And that sort of evidence is there, but you need better evidence. It's going to be interesting now to see if some of those trials I think there was one on Parkinson's that didn't work recently. That revealed there wasn't evidence in Parkinson's, for instance. So I think it's going to be very much a work in progress. But it is strange because the job of GLP-1 is more tied into appetite regulation and metabolism. But again, that might speak to our previous discussion around metabolism and the immune system, and maybe it's somehow regulating metabolic processes. Such that the inflammatory state is lessened. So there's a reasonable hypothesis in all of this to explore this,
Yeah, they have a really interesting mechanism of actually Ozempic. So is it true that it does cross the blood-brain barrier? So it works in the brain to suppress appetite?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Well, that's its main place, probably. I mean, as you might know, it goes into the brain, regulates the sense of feeling full and appetite and craving. Those are the key things it seems to regulate. And it's nice biology, and it was discovered, as you may know, in the Gila monster,
Yeah, I came across
that. So what they were looking for, like when you eat your dinner, eventually you feel full, right? Now, why is that? It's partly your stomach is sensing the food, but the GLP-1 gets made, goes to your brain and says, stop eating. Otherwise you'd be gorging all the time. It's a natural physiological thing. And that was a big advance in the world of obesity. They began discovering these hormones, like leptin's another one, And so that's its day job, if you like, is to regulate those sorts of things. And then, as you might know as well, Donald, there's evidence it stops craving for alcohol as well and other things.
Yeah, and
you never know. There might be a role here in limiting addiction, which would be great.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that it seems it can curb bad habits or habitual behaviors. Yeah.
I've seen as well that it makes people feel less alive, if I can use that in a general sense.
Okay. Yeah.
Like we're meant to want things, remember, and enjoy things.
Yeah.
And I've heard, have you seen that stuff? There's people on it report.
I think I came across anecdotal reports of that.
More anecdotal than anything. That would be consistent with its main action, which is in the brain,
Yeah. But I guess everything has some kind of side effect, doesn't it? Like it's probably hard to limit it all.
Yeah. Well, that's what dogs us.
Yeah.
Right. The phrase I use, Donald, is the good Lord giveth and the good Lord taketh away.
I've actually seen really interesting stuff recently. I think they're in maybe phase 1 or phase 2 trials. So obviously a big issue with Ozempic that people talk about is like excessive weight loss and maybe like atrophy of muscle mass and things like that. But I think there's early trials of combining Ozempic with an inhibitor of
Myostatin.
Myostatin, yes.
Oh,
So do you think that's feasible?
Well, that's absolutely feasible.
Yeah.
Now, I know I work on this drug in Eli Lilly. We have a collaboration with Eli Lilly, who make not on Ozempic now, on inflammation.
Okay.
They make Wegovy, and I meet them occasionally. They're homing in on two things. One, can you stop the muscle wasting? That's a major negative for this, especially in older people, remember, who are on this drug. The muscle mass goes, they fall, and that can be extremely damaging and debilitating for them, So they're all over that one, right? They're also over the brain bleeds and try to stop that side effect. So you're right, the idea there would be, as you just said, there are side effects or effects you don't want to see. So they're working on that very hard, because if you can stop that muscle wasting, that'll be a huge add-on, because people have to come off it, you see, when the muscles begin to go, and that's a metabolic process as well, by the way.
Okay.
So if you're changing metabolism in this big way, your muscle needs to work metabolically as well, and that needs to be getting limited as well. And you're right, myostatin is the definite way to go there, because that's quite a specific thing. You could see blocking that wouldn't necessarily have too many side effects either, if you get the dose right. So I predict eventually it'll be a combination therapy with GLP-1 or semaglutide type drugs, and the myostatin inhibitor will be in the one tablet,
Yeah. Are myostatin inhibitors a new thing? Because it just seems like, obviously, sarcopenia is a major issue, because as people get older, you have muscle wastage and you have falls, and once you get a broken hip or an injury like that, it's very hard to function. So it just seems like it would be common sense to use these maybe, like you said,
professional,
drugs with little side effects to prevent muscle wastage. Like, is that possible? Like, have they been around long enough to think about that? Or
I have. I know it's been around a while. The myostatin notion's been there for a while, and you may have seen these massive muscular transgenic mice. So I don't know. It's a good question. Again, you wonder were there side effects possibly? Limited use, so that might hold things back. I presume the likes of Lilly and Novo are all over this now, and they're digging into it deeply, and I know they're pursuing it. So, but you wonder why it wasn't used in other muscle wasting situations. I suspect it could have been some side effect. You never know.
Yeah, I think I came across somewhere that there was obviously like hypertrophy of the muscle, but it wasn't functional mass.
Yeah.
So
that's trouble. Yeah, you need to be a muscle. There's an area for biochemists now, muscle biochemists, to figure that stuff out.
Yeah. It's interesting.
But you're right though. These things like sarcopenia, they're very serious things to happen as we age. So you think they would have been looking at that more closely.
Yeah.
It's all about the cost benefit again, don't remember. So, muscle wasting is a consequence of getting old anyway. Exercise probably helps a lot, that sort of stuff, so you wouldn't necessarily want to medicate it,
Yeah.
Obesity, that's a very serious condition. Or you might want to go down that road with this, because the benefits would outweigh the risks of these things, or the necessity of it will be there,
Do you think there's a risk of maybe people moralizing Ozempic and maybe future generations of those drugs, that like they see obesity as something that should be more about personal responsibility than...
we humans are shocking as a species, aren't we? So carry on, You can't beat a bit of shaming, can you?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's clearly people who need help with obesity without doubt, and no matter what you try to do to help them, and nothing has worked, and it's, this has been going on for decades. Whether a little bit of being overweight, that probably would be much more different, because again, the side effects are there, the cost benefit thing is in the wrong direction, that kind of thing, I don't think we're all going to be on Ozempic to keep us slim. That'd be ridiculous.
Yeah. I guess you kind of have this persistence of maybe people like to buy into like a naturalistic fallacy where, maybe supplements and personal responsibility are viewed as like maybe a first option before medication.
Well,
I personally don't agree with that, but it is very common.
If you go to your GP or you go to a metabolic expert, they won't give you Ozempic initially. They'll try to help you with your lifestyle first. See if you get help things along in that direction.
Yeah.
And some do manage to do that, but some try, and it can be genetic. Either their hormonal balances are
genetic
innate,
components.
That sort of stuff. And no lifestyle change can help. So therefore you need to intervene. And I wouldn't be critical of people who try and fail and they're trying their best and they can't get anywhere with it either. Life's tough, Now, remember, the job of most medicines, maybe not most, a lot of medicines are taken because we won't alter our lifestyles. Statins, for example.
Yeah, that's true.
So you can easily lower your cholesterol, if you take more exercise and change your diet. But doctors know my patient can't be bothered doing that. I'll give him some statin.
Yeah, I think
same with blood pressure.
I think we usually underestimate the role of genetics on obesity. Like it's obviously
we do
very
well,
much driven.
Breakthrough. Yeah, and there's a very important Irish scientist, Stephen O'Reilly. Have you come across him, Donny?
No, I haven't actually.
He's in Cambridge. He's from Fibs originally. I've known him for years. He was one of the first to say the genetic component was really important, and he found this thing called leptin was deficient in morbidly obese people, and that was a big step forward. In other words, it wasn't just a case of you're eating too many cakes here,
Yeah.
It's an innate genetic aspect to this.
Yeah.
And some people consider that more important than the lifestyle thing,
Yeah, because you have this thing called NEAT. Have you ever come across that? So non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So some people just maybe fidget or just move more and without even realizing it, like it's not conscious. And
you got it. My wife's like that. Yeah. I mean, she's always fidgeting. All her life. Now, and I sit very still. Now, what's that? I don't know what that is, but that's a big factor here.
That's actually probably not talked about enough. I just wanted to ask you about, so maybe in recent years, people have talked a bit more about possibly the role of inflammation in some subtypes of depression and possibly schizophrenia as well. Is there, there's definitely something true to that?
Definitely true. Yeah, there's very nice stuff on that. A guy called Ed Bullmore, who I did a sabbatical in GSK back in about 10 years ago now. Back when Ed Bullmore was there, he was involved in depression, just in inflammation was his area. He's written a very good book, actually. I think it's called The Inflamed Mind, that describes all this. So where that's coming from is, once these cytokines were discovered, as you may know, Donald, they realized some cytokines will cause depression. So that started with interferons for hepatitis C. Now, interferons have antiviral effects, but they noticed if they gave people interferons, they got depressed. The second thing that was realized was TNF, which is in rheumatoid, a key cytokine there. When they blocked TNF, and depression goes along with rheumatoid, it's a feature. When they blocked TNF, the depression got relieved. And then the final piece, scientifically, in the first phase of this was, if you get infected, you get what's called sickness behavior. Now, we all know that. You crawl under your duvet,
Yeah.
You withdraw yourself, and that evolved to withdraw you from the tribe to stop the thing spreading, That's driven by cytokines, and that looks like depression. So it looks as if what's happening here is a normal process that is sickness behavior, and depression during infection becomes chronic, simply because these cytokines are chronic, and now depression is a feature. Now, what Bullmore would advocate for, and several people, block some of these cytokines as a way to relieve depression.
Yeah.
And that's ongoing. It's gone a bit quiet, that actually. That was very prominent 3 or 4 years ago as an idea. I haven't seen much lately on it. But there's no question that depression, a feature of depression, is in the immune system, let's put it that way. And some drug companies would have groups specifically working on targeting these processes as a new way to treat depression.
Do you think that's just subtypes, or do you think maybe major depressive disorder?
I don't know.
It's hard to tell.
They may have some evidence for that by measuring cytokines in certain types of depression. You never know. But I'm not sure you could definitively say this type will respond. But then you'd love to see that with depression anyway, because, as you may know, some people don't respond to current antidepressants. Maybe they would respond to cytokine blockers. You never know. So I think that'll be a work in progress.
So obviously you were super prominent during COVID and an excellent communicator during COVID. What do you think about the role of science communication? Because obviously, making discoveries and breakthroughs is really important, but I think you communicate science really coherently. And when I listened to you, I was listening to you on the radio for the entire pandemic, and I was so impressed at how easily I could pick up what you were saying. So what do you think is the importance of science communication?
It's essential, more and more essential as society advances. We need scientists in society, first of all.
Yeah.
We need them to communicate what they do. Now, it's not for everybody. Some people aren't that good at it, which is fine as well. You can't be everything, but a certain number of scientists do it, and it's really important because it's important for 2 reasons, I know. One is the taxpayers paying us, remember, so we've got to tell them what we're doing. That's the first thing, right? Usually, because you get grants and, you're working in universities and so on. And then the second reason is to give people an idea how great science can be and how it can help us so tremendously, to make sure the funding keeps flowing, and keep science being supported,
Yeah.
So 2 things. The third thing for me during the pandemic and my own research more and more is it gives people hope, but you can't be giving people hope really is a thing, especially when times are tough. And the pandemic was a very tough time
Yeah.
for people. So it was even more important to communicate the science then.
Do you think we would be prepared for another pandemic, or do you think we're better prepared because?
Oh, that's a human nature question again, Don.
Yeah.
Well, the trouble with us is, as you know, is that we evolved to respond to acute threats, not long-term threats. That's the problem. Like, you know, if a tiger walks into the room there with you, you would run like.
Yeah.
If I say to you, there might be a tiger in 10 years, forget it.
Yeah.
So it's tricky. We're going against built-in evolved traits here. Although I think hopefully we've learned a lot from that pandemic. I think the main benefits that we've learned or the thing we'll take from us, we can get a vaccine very quickly next time because of RNA technology. That's a great thing. So technology again, helping us there. The second thing, we might be more ready to avoid lockdowns, you know?
Okay.
To avoid that very damaging thing because it was necessary, at least the first couple were, you know? But as you know, they were damaging. So we'd like to avoid lockdowns in various ways. One big one for me is ventilation.
Yeah.
We know from all those studies, if you can good ventilation, dilutes out the virus tremendously. I put ventilation systems in all the schools now with the National Development Plan, for instance. I pay for the ventilation. Yeah.
Okay.
Things like that. Now the government won't. The trouble with this is it's hard to convince people of a distant threat.
Do you think that, like, if we did have another pandemic, do you think if it wasn't a coronavirus or a strain of coronavirus, could we still develop the mRNA vaccines as quickly, or would something potentially catch us off guard?
Well, you're far too well informed. That's a really great question. From a fungi, there's never been a vaccine for a fungus.
Yeah.
They seem very cunning as creatures to avoid the immune system.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have obvious antigens to go after necessarily. It's very unexplored, that, you know?
Yeah. Have you seen?
It's like science.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you're going to ask me about the science fiction.
The Last of Us. Yeah. Have you seen that?
Oh, God, yeah. That's on the money, that one.
Yeah, it's really good because they talked about fungi at the start, actually. And I'd never thought about that before, but it was.
Oh, yeah.
It was
some fungi, they do infect us, you know.
Yeah.
Well, athlete's foot was an example, was a benign one. But so, no, we would worry slightly about fungi. I don't think with other ones, though, although it would be experimental, but I would be optimistic we'd get a vaccine even against the fungus. You might use 4 or 5 antigens. So the beauty of the RNA technology is, as you know, you can just code for the antigen quickly. You're not purifying it or using attenuated versions of the pathogen. You're just using RNA. And it works. So we know from the pandemic, it works fantastically well. So I'd be relatively optimistic we get any pathogen that emerges, but still you'd be slightly concerned.
Yeah, I when the mRNA vaccines came out, I was actually blown away with how quick they're developed. Really, really impressive. Obviously, they function a bit differently to a traditional vaccine. I remember at the time, people were talking about, like, could you use an mRNA vaccine to maybe vaccinate against certain chronic diseases and stuff like that, possibly cancers. Do you still think that's in the works? Do you think it's possible?
Absolutely. Now, there's a bit of a nightmare at the moment in America where they hate RNA.
Yeah.
And that's very peculiar, but that's the way it is.
Because the conspiracy theorists as head of the Department of Health and Human Sciences.
Well, you've got lunatics in charge over there.
Yeah.
Now, very interestingly, BioNTech, remember them, Donald? They were with Pfizer. They've moved away from vaccines for infectious diseases just into cancer.
Okay.
Because they know the public sort of enthusiasm RNA vaccines has gone down massively. They're making a commercial decision.
Yeah.
They could work really well in cancer, and there's more and more evidence for that, by the way, building up. Now, there's an easier sell, isn't it?
Yeah, big time.
You come into my surgery if I'm a doctor, which I'm not a medical doctor, but if I was, and you have lung cancer, and I say to you, I've got an RNA therapeutic for you, you'll jump at it. You buy my hand off. I say to you, would you take this RNA vaccine for a disease you haven't got? Oh, no, thanks. It's that kind of thing, you know?
Do you think that, would that target many cancers or?
Potentially.
Yeah. Okay. So it could be like a blanket treatment. Well, obviously not a complete blanket treatment for cancer, but maybe it could target several. That's possible.
Potentially, precisely. Yeah, because all you're doing, it's very clever. Again, instead of work in progress and there's trials running, they look interesting, some of the trials. We need a definitive phase 3 to really prove it, I suppose you might say, but so far so good. You can take anyone's tumor now and sequence it, find 10 mutations or whatever the number is in that tumor, make RNA molecules for all 10, inject those in, and then the immune system is activated to go after that tumor.
Could you engineer a more favorable environment for the immune system and less favorable for cancer or for tumors?
You might.
Yeah.
I think it's more likely you will modify the immune cells
Okay.
But they can win the battle against the tumor for the nutrients. That kind of thing is more likely.
You're obviously very impressed by CRISPR technology. Do you want to just explain what that is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, well, you have to be impressed by that. That's like a microscope. The invention of that is as powerful as when we invented the microscope.
Yeah.
It's just a very precise, accurate way to edit genes. I mean, there were previous technologies before that tried to do that. We used to use the things called talons, and it didn't really work. I mean, they were very inefficient. There'd be off-target effects. You'd be hitting the wrong genes, And then the great Charpentier and Dowden come along, and they find this bacterial-based system initially, as you may know. That's a great way to target genes, and then they make that into a way to target genes in any species. In fact, it's part of the bacteria's immune system. That's where it was actually discovered. The bacteria make the CRISPR system to edit genes in viruses and kill them.
Yeah.
And that was the beauty of science, wasn't it? Because it was very serendipitous in a way. And then they wondered, could that be deployed against any gene in any organism? And it's got this Cas9 system. It's quite using RNA, of course, to target a given gene, But it's wonderful science there.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing it in the clinic. I think the first couple of drugs based on CRISPR have been approved.
So I think so far sickle cell anemia has been the only thing that's
thalassemia.
What do you think maybe in the near term, or so maybe the next 5 years, what else could be targeted with CRISPR?
You name it. The sky's the limit.
Really?
Now, the trouble is, it has to be seen as early days. There may be off-target effects. I mean, as we've been discussing overall, there can be side effects, unintended consequences. There's no evidence of that yet. But if you just discover a new therapeutic, right, and you do a phase 3 trial, that might be 1,000 people, 2,000 people, and you see no side effects. You go into 1 million, that's a different story. A certain percent might have problems. So we got to watch it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if it continues the way it's going, any genetic disease is targetable with that technology, and there's thousands of those diseases out there, So I think initially it'll be the big one to look for is cystic fibrosis, I think, because that's relatively common. We know what the genetic alterations are, and that could be correctable with CRISPR. So that's one to look at as a kind of a proof of concept, you might call it.
People might assume that a lot of diseases are caused by maybe one gene, and obviously many are, but like if you're talking about polygenic diseases, do you think that's plausible to target with CRISPR, or is that?
That's much more challenging.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're going to use different CRISPR vectors, as they call them, or targeted RNA molecules. They're arranged and have to be used. It's not beyond the bounds of possibility. We'll see the monogenic ones first, like sickle cell, thalassemia. And if they yield, then they'll begin to think of polygenic approaches, I bet, next. The big ones will be Huntington's disease, another good example.
Yeah.
And that's a monogenic disease, and it's devastating, Or Friedreich's ataxia, another one. So they're the first ones that we'll see. But then you could move on to polygenic. I wouldn't see there's any reason why you wouldn't.
Interesting. And do you think there might be bioethical concerns about maybe editing genes that we passed on in the germline or throughout generations, and maybe just editing somatic mutations? So like, obviously you could edit just the genes in the person and not have them passed on versus passing them on. Do you think there's concerns around that?
There's two big concerns. That's one. You got to regulate for that. You can't allow that. You can't have germline being modified. Everybody agrees with that. That's one big concern. The second is going after genes that are to do with things like personality, say, or whatever, which don't exist, of course. But still, there will be bad actors, as happens in every technology. So you got to regulate this, and we need regulators for all therapies, really. And this is no different.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Okay, so I might we might switch to some bigger picture questions if you're happy with that.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, so if you were to steelman a scientific argument for free will, what would be the closest you could get? Because I try to think about this sometimes, but I'm kind of like, I don't know if we could really argue that pure free will, like in a.
Have you read Nevermind the Bollocks, my book?
Yeah. I have. Yeah, the whole thing.
That's a philosophical question.
Yeah.
Or may I say that's an ecumenical matter? Maybe that's the answer to that one. I don't know. It's very hard, isn't it? I think we have to consider what we do as free will,
Yeah.
We do make decisions, and that's the way it is, Now, whether those decisions are preordained, that's the question. That's the word they use sometimes, isn't it? I suppose there's a possibility of that. But you can get tangled up in that and worry about it too much. We do make decisions, and that's the way it is. The reason for those decisions can be complicated.
It's interesting because obviously people who are maybe religious or religious kind of to your mind would say that, yeah, free will is complete. We have complete free will, but yeah, when you think about even like something like hunger, I think you made this point in your book. Like if you're really, really hungry, like you definitely your free will goes down because yeah.
I think it's slightly arrogant that in a way, that notion, because it puts the blame on someone else sometimes, if you act in a way that you're not in control of. I always felt the invention of the devil was very clever because you could blame him on a human being evil, the human being innately evil.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you think so? In the US right now, and online, there's a huge amount of talk about artificial intelligence and super intelligence. Do you actually think super intelligence is possible? Like, would it be or even human-like intelligence in art, like in silicone, or is that? Do you think so?
It's heading in that direction. I'm reading the same stuff as you, I imagine, on this one. It's amazing the amount of research and efforts going into AI now. Billions of dollars being invested. You may have seen all this. Now that's very interesting because we're very ingenious as a species. All these very clever people are trying to develop it in various ways. So we've got to see more and more progress there. And the way it's going, it's quite possible to configure the situation where AI is as good as a human being in many things. Yeah. Now, whether it goes into a super state, that's something that's tricky, I suppose. You never know. I wonder what that would look like. It's terrifying. It's like this in another way. Yeah. But I love the what's intriguing me lately, Donald, is the arts. I mean, did you see there was a thing on Brendan O'Connor when he got an AI to write a poem? Yeah. This real poet wrote a poem, and then they couldn't tell the difference.
That actually kind of makes you think, like, in terms of scientific discoveries, like it doesn't seem to have made any major breakthroughs yet, I guess. Like, do you think it just doesn't have that capacity to maybe?
We're waiting for that. I'm waiting for a drug to be discovered purely through AI. It may happen. It's more likely that it will happen.
Yeah, it's weird because I've seen the argument, like people say, if like a human had all of that knowledge, like stored in their head, like they'd surely be able to make connections between things that we haven't seen before, but it doesn't really seem to be able to do that. So it's
learning though, isn't it?
Yeah.
The machine learning aspect is getting better and learning allegedly. It's well beyond my pay grade to understand it. Talking to AI people, who I've met a few of them. And I've consulted for a company in Boston called Montour using AI for drug discovery. I've had chats to those guys. You get about 2 minutes out of them and then you're lost. It's this kind of thing.
Okay.
But still, I think the learning process is a fascinating thing, isn't it? Yeah. It learns, then it's going to do what we do. I guess what you're asking is a good question. Is there something special about our brains?
Yeah.
That can't be recreated in an AI context? And the answer is probably not.
Okay.
It's just information processing ultimately.
Do you think so? Do you think that's all it comes down to?
I don't know. The brain, our consciousness is still, we don't understand it, do we? So every time a new machine is invented, it said, oh, that's the way the brain is. So the steam engine was thought to be like the brain. Computers, and our brain is nothing like a computer, remember? That's the big thing. So we'll see. It's a very interesting sort of...
Yeah. Is there something special about like a carbon-based information processing system?
It could be. We don't understand memory at all. The molecular basis for memory is almost completely not understood. So who knows? Various theories that as soon as quantum physics is invented, that must be the way the brain operates.
So obviously there's been loads of health innovations maybe throughout the last 20 years. What one are you most impressed by? Is it
I think it's the immunotherapy for cancer. That's one that stands out because that's making a real difference to people, obviously enough.
Okay.
And where you would have incurable cancers in the past, immunotherapy is now curing them. Now, again, it's only 10, 20%. Okay. So we need to get much higher than that. But that to me is a real tangible advance using real science, of course, because we know how the immune system works. The two big ones, as you know, the checkpoint inhibitors, which target PD-1, CTLA-4, and then you've also got CAR T-cell therapy-based approaches. These are very high-tech and they're very sort of, wonderfully backed by years of scientific endeavor, and now they're working in humans. So I mean, that's a big one.
Would you say, like, curiosity or raw intelligence is maybe a superior trait in a scientist? Like, what would you look for? What do you think is?
Well, it's got to be curiosity. We don't know what intelligence is.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, I think we're all very similar. If you we're Homo sapiens, obviously our species. There's tiny differences between us in terms of our intelligence, I think, and there's a huge environmental influence on that. Right? And then the environment is probably more important than built-in genetic basis for intelligence.
Yeah.
There are twin studies suggesting intelligence big genetic component, of course. But I'm not sure about those studies.
Yeah, there's a
They're
heritability gap there, actually. There's a
But they're real.
Yeah.
I'm not knocking the science. There's good data. But overall, they're defined populations. It's hard to control for things.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hate the notion that it's the Aryan race type nonsense. If you
Yeah,
go down
yeah.
that.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
it's not. That's complete nonsense.
Yeah. Because
Like a kid born in Ringsend in Dublin versus a kid born in Sandy Cove versus a kid born in Foxrock, they're all the same as far as I'm concerned.
yeah, yeah. No,
Maybe a 0.1% difference between them,
Yeah, yeah.
intellectually speaking.
Yeah, it's
You know?
interesting because the genome-wide association studies for like psychological traits or intelligence are much lower than the twin studies. I mean, you're getting like
got it.
max 20%. So there's a huge gap there. So there's obviously more going on than you think.
What's the guy's name in London? He's famous for these twin studies in intelligence. I can't remember his name now, but
Is it Robert Pullman?
that's the guy.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, that's a sensible thing to do, is to look at twins who've been separated.
Yeah.
There's so many variables.
Yeah, very hard to control for.
Yeah.
So you actually wrote about this recently, so I'm going to ask you about it. So maybe say in the next 50 years, what's a potential societal threat or civilization threat in terms of maybe not existential risk, but that could maybe tip us into chaos? So you wrote about a few scenarios. So what do you think is?
There are a whole species. You're wondering, are you?
Yeah.
Oh God! Now that's a good. I don't know. I mean, I think my fear is history tells us we're very good at destroying things, aren't we? You know.
Yeah.
Very good at destroying our ecosystems through history. So you'd wonder, it has to be climate change is the big one.
Yeah.
Looming large, and we don't seem to have the capacity to slow it down.
Yeah.
So I did write about that. There's a threat now
Yeah, I saw that.
it's going to be breached. The temperature thing will be breached by 2030 maybe, and that's going to be devastating. So I think the climate change one is an existential threat to us. Now, the reason why that'll be damaging is not just because there's floods killing people, mass movement of people. That will cause societal disturbance. Can you imagine? So that's one that we got to look at. And the trouble is, we know what to do to stop it, and we're not doing it. You know, and look what's happening in America. America's gone back to being like a medieval country.
Yeah. It's bizarre. Does the defunding of scientific institutions and research institutions in America, does that obviously disturb you? Yeah. It's insane.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Oh, it's disastrous. And not only that, it's more a society thing. I mean, those scientists are all very well, and we live in our bubbles. You want to get the general public on board with these things, and this absolutely prevents that or threatens that, and that's terrible then, because they won't vote for the right politician then either, you know?
Where do you think that? Do you think that just comes from like financial incentives, like a bizarre ideology at the top? Like where does that opposition to science come from? Is it all Trump?
It's complicated. I think it's the pandemic is one reason.
Yeah.
American individualism has been there through its history. They hate being told what to do, and they were told what to do in the pandemic and didn't like it.
There's probably a bit of that.
They're kicking back against that. That's one big feature here, I think.
Yeah.
Now you might get into conspiracy theories and malignant influences and all the rest of it, trying to shut down Harvard, you know, whatever it is. There could be a bit of that going on. I wouldn't say that's not the case. There's a political agenda here, you know?
Yeah.
So, but it's just disturbing, really.
Why do you think they have, like, I guess, on a large scale, they have more maybe medical innovation than also the EU has? Do you think it's to do with maybe regulation in the EU? Like, do you think we should?
Well, no, if you're in it, you got to hand it to America as well, because all the big innovations have come from there.
Yeah.
The reason for that is if you've a loose place where individualism is respected, where mavericks can somehow attraction, they're the ones who make the discoveries, and it kind of encourages that. So culturally, I think, or whatever, maybe historically and culturally, there's been a tendency towards, you know, the people who are outsiders who make a difference. Let's put it that way, and that's more common. And they're the ones who make the big breakthroughs in science. Anyway, so that's the first thing. The second thing is money, without doubt, because you need to invest in these things. Okay. And there's more money in America to invest in new ideas than there is in Europe, and more capacity for risk and risk taking. So that's a big factor, we think, as well. And I'm on the European Research Council. I mean, we're looking at this closely. As Europe failed to innovate as effectively as as America or China. China's taken over, of course. And there's all these cultural, historic reasons. We've got to correct that. We're going to work hard on that. We're advocating strongly for increased investment, because without money, you can do nothing. That's a factor. For the lack of financial support for fundamental research is a huge negative in Europe.
Yeah. You see some tech leaders in the US maybe saying that, or espousing the belief that technology will solve the climate issues, and like anything maybe that's kind of oriented around degrowth should be shunned completely, and maybe just technological process will solve it. Do you see any like credibility in that?
I do. You need a combination.
Yeah.
Because it is again about trying to change people's minds and support people and get people, behaving in a certain way. Public health is a good thing. I knew the only way out of the pandemic was a vaccine.
Yeah.
The technological solution was the only way out of that, because people won't go along with the guidelines. Same with climate change. For some reason, people won't go along with litigation changes or whatever it is. So we need a technological solution to go along with the other things we're going to do, and it's the combination. And that's what the IPCC report says. Remember as well. The trouble is, if you lean towards technology too much, it takes away the responsibility from us.
Okay.
And we're all in this together, and we all have to act as best we can. So I think as a species, should we say, collective action is the key, and one part of that will be technological.
What do you think is the best popular science book of all time? Is it The Selfish Gene or something else?
It's never mind the bollocks. It's not.
Except yours, obviously. That's what I mean. I should have put that in there.
The best popular, the one that influenced me massively was Isaac Asimov. Remember him? That he was a science fiction. He wrote 3 popular science books. One on biology, one on chemistry, and one on physics. And I read them when I was a teenager.
Okay.
And I put down my eventual becoming of a scientist fully to reading Asimov.
Wow.
A book I thought that was fantastic was Matt Ridley's book called Genome.
Yeah. I read that.
Great.
Yeah.
I mean, that's and scientifically accurate. So they'd be ones I would list.
Do you read sci-fi?
I do a bit. Yeah. No, I don't like fantasy.
Okay. Yeah. I'd actually be the same.
I like sci-fi that's somewhat believable or feasible. In fact, I was on the radio yesterday with Kieran Cuddihy on Newstalk.
Oh, really? Okay.
With my favourite books.
Okay.
I told him one I read recently is called Project Hail Mary. Have you heard that one, Andy
No.
Weir? You know Andy Weir? He wrote The Martian. That's his famous. His latest book, it came out about 3 years ago. It's called Project Hail Mary.
Okay.
And it's a really good science fiction book. I loved it. It's about an alien force arrives in our solar system and starts taking energy from our sun.
Okay.
And the sun starts to dim, and then it's all about the alien and how the alien. So I like that.
Have you come across?
Could happen.
Yeah, if possibly. Have you heard of Neil Stephenson? He actually predicted.
No.
Yeah, he's an American guy, but he actually he's written lots of kind of science fiction books, but they're not fantasy based. But he kind of predicted the rise of like things like LLMs and the metaverse. And a few other things. So it's interesting sometimes what they can get right, even though they're
I love Star Trek.
Yeah.
That got loads of things right back in the 60s. It predicted, I think, a third of the technologies in Star Trek have come true.
Yeah. That's insane.
That's really interesting that kind of thing can be. That's the type of science fiction I like. It's that's actually on board. The best ones have scientists advising them.
Okay. Yeah.
Feasibility, and I like those.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with you there. I got to ask you about this because you wrote about it recently. Why? So obviously, I think it's pretty clear that like all tanning in any way is really bad. But Irish people, maybe Western people, love to tan. So am I correct in saying any browning of the skin is bad, isn't it? Like it's radiation.
Yeah, I mean it's probably a bit extreme to say all bad.
Yeah.
And sunshine has benefits, remember, as well. Endorphins get released in the skin that make us feel a bit better. So there's good aspects to it. But the view would be the risk of melanoma. Any burning or tanning increases the risk of that.
Yeah.
And it's dependent like most things. So sadly, the view would be any level of tanning is a risk with it. But then everything's risky, isn't it? So I think you nuanced. But there's no doubt that the Irish cancer, all the cancer societies say avoid.
Okay.
It's like smoking, you know?
Yeah. Equivalent with that, you think?
Yeah. Some beds are. Yeah. The study showing that bed can be as high a risk as smoking is for risk of cancer, friends.
Do you think alcohol gets a bad rap? Do you think that at low levels it's...
Yeah, that's a good question as well. It's the same kind of thing again. You see, living life is risky, right? Whatever you do. Walking down the street is a risk. Drinking a pint is a risk. And as adults, we can choose to take that risk or not. We know alcohol is a very dangerous thing in excess, you know? And there is evidence that moderate drinking can be beneficial. So it's a balance.
Yeah, I've seen that.
As with most things, it's about balancing things.
What do you think is potentially on the horizon over the next 10 years? Like say 10 years down the line, what diseases do you think would you hope we have cured? Or like
the hope in my
mitigated?
area, in inflammatory diseases, there's got to be, there's so much effort going into them. Tens of thousands of people, every drug company's doing them, you know. There's about, if you take, for example, in... let's say Crohn's disease, there's loads of trials running. Alzheimer's actually as well. There's loads of trials running.
Okay.
So you got to hope one or two of those is going to show more progress. We're a bit optimistic about those, I think, and all this effort should yield there's no doubt the cancer business as well, because the immunotherapy is going to improve. There are side effects. There's one company I'm involved in, Don, like trying to limit the side effects of immunotherapy.
Okay.
So we know where, if I can use the unfortunate phrase, the bodies are buried. We know what the problems are.
Yeah.
We'd hope to see progress, see more progress in cancer. And we need to make progress in inflammatory diseases because devastating. They're going up in incidence all the time. They don't kill you. They do shorten your life. But it's a miserable 20, 30 years if you're diagnosed with Parkinson's in your 50s or disease in your 20s, for some.
Yeah.
We have made progress. There's some signs that some things do work a bit, but we need to see more progress. And I'm optimistic we'll see more.
Last question. So what do you think that fitness and wellness influencers get right, and what do they get completely wrong?
Well, they get, well, you see, it's not rocket science, is it? Let's put it that way.
Okay.
We know exercise is good.
Yeah.
We know good diet is beneficial. A good night's sleep, meditation. These have all been shown through antiquity.
Yeah.
What they get right is we should be living like we're in the Stone Age. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
By which I mean, don't eat processed food, go hunting or whatever, run around the place a bit. That's good for you. So they get all that right. I think something that's oversold is cold water immersion. There's not much evidence.
No.
That.
Yeah.
It makes you feel good. It's good. I'm not against it. It's fine, but it's not going to stop rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah. Some of them like to tell you to go out and this might be beneficial. Like maybe go out and get morning light every morning. That probably has something to do with sleep.
Circadian bit, that gets more interesting. There's no question. Circadian rhythm is key to our health as well.
Yeah.
And that means getting sunlight in at the right time, and that can be useful.
Okay.
And the sunlight quality changes during the day, so morning light's probably more effective. So that's probably, there's something in that. I mean, overall, I'd say there's something in a lot of it. Just don't spend too much money on it.
I think it might be, maybe the way it's presented sometimes is you think you've more control than you do, or the body is almost treated like a machine that you can kind of rattle around a bit. And
it's a challenge. It's a challenge to us scientists to come up with better therapies, and you won't need these other approaches. It works. So that's what's going on there, I think, part.
Luke, thank you. It was a really enjoyable conversation. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Very interesting chat. Thanks very much.